When we talk about ethics or, just trying to do good, I think most of us automatically think about making things better, right? Bringing more happiness, more benefit to more people.
That's the standard view, yeah. Classical utilitarianism. It's been hugely influential in Western thought.
But what if that whole way of thinking is, well, maybe not wrong, but misses the most important point? What if it's not about chasing joy, but about running away from pain?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. Negative utilitarianism, or NU. It's this whole ethical system built on one core idea. Suffering is the absolute worst thing, the thing we must focus on eliminating.
So we've dug into the source material here, really trying to get our heads around this. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out why proponents of NU think minimizing suffering trumps maximizing happiness, and look at some of the really radical places that idea takes you.
Right. So if your classic utilitarian like Bentham or Mill asks, what brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number? Negative utilitarianism flips it. It asks what reduces the greatest amount of suffering for the greatest number. It's a total shift in focus. Less about striving for the positive, more about desperately avoiding the negative.
Okay, let's dig into that right away. If traditional ethics is trying to say, get the highest positive score, pleasure minus pain, what's the absolute key difference with NU? It feels like more than just tweaking the formula.
Oh, it is. The central claim is that suffering just carries more moral weight than happiness. They're not equal opposites. In any moral calculation, pain isn't just a negative number, it's like a heavier negative number. Reducing that pain has to take priority over boosting pleasure.
I get that in an emergency. Like if someone's house is on fire, you put out the fire. You don't worry about redecorating the living room first. But NU sort of makes that emergency footing the permanent rule for everything.
That's a great way to put it. That's the jump. And there's a kind of mathematical analogy some sources use that helps make it stick. Traditional utilitarianism. Maximize the result of pleasure minus pain. Get that number as big as possible.
Right. Maximize the net good.
But NU says, no, your real job is to minimize the pain variable. Just make that number as small as possible, ideally 0. For some versions of NU, the pleasure side, it just doesn't really count in the same way, or maybe counts for nothing at all. It's all about stamping out the negative.
Even if the overall net score doesn't improve as much.
Exactly. So alleviating a huge amount of suffering for maybe a small group could be seen as morally better than bringing a tiny bit of joy to millions, even if the sheer number of people helped look smaller in the first case.
Okay, so why? Why give suffering this kind of supreme moral status? What's the reasoning behind putting pain on this pedestal, so to speak?
Well, negative utilitarians usually point to a basic asymmetry between pain and pleasure. They often give 3 main reasons. First, suffering is just more urgent. Intense pain, deep despair, grinding poverty. These things demand our attention in a way that, say, adding a little more pleasure to an already decent life just doesn't.
It's like the difference between needing rescue and wanting a bonus.
Pretty much. And that links to the second point. Happiness is arguably optional, but suffering isn't. You can live a perfectly good, meaningful life without being ecstatic all the time. Maybe you're stoic, maybe you're just content. But you can't really flourish if you're under constant, unbearable pain, physical or mental. So pain relief demands priority.
Okay, urgency, necessity. What's the third one? Something about how we react.
Yeah, they call it the empathy bias. The argument is that psychologically, we humans are just wired to react more strongly to seeing others suffer than to seeing them happy. Think about the news. One tragedy grabs way more attention and resources than stories of everyday joy. NU advocates say this isn't just a quirk. It reflects a moral truth. Suffering just hits harder.
Interesting. So who came up with this? It sounds quite profound, maybe even a bit bleak. Where does it originate?
Well, the idea has ancient roots, you could argue, but in modern philosophy, Karl Popper is a key figure. In his big 1945 book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, he flat out said it. The reduction of suffering should be placed before the promotion of happiness.
And he wasn't just being pessimistic, was he? There was a philosophical reason behind that.
Absolutely. For Popper, it was partly about objectivity. He argued that suffering things like starvation, pain, oppression, it's more concrete, more easily agreed upon across cultures. Happiness, on the other hand, is really subjective, fuzzy, hard to measure reliably. So if you want a solid basis for ethics, focus on the thing you can actually identify and tackle: suffering.
Okay, so Popper lays some groundwork. But then you have people today pushing it much further, right? Like David Pearce.
Pearce, yeah, he's a big name now. He champions something called the hedonistic imperative. And that's not just about reducing suffering. It's this incredibly ambitious goal of using technology, especially biotech, to abolish suffering entirely in all sentient life.
Abolish all suffering.
Hmm.
Wow. That does sound like science fiction.
It borders on it, yeah, but it's driving some serious philosophical debate. And then you've got thinkers like Hilary Greaves and Toby Ord who are connecting NU ideas to long-termism and existential risk. The idea there is that preventing some future catastrophe that causes unimaginable suffering, think runaway AI or engineered pandemics, is the ultimate NU goal. Minimizing that massive future pain outweighs almost anything else.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because it's not just one single idea, is it? It seems like there's a whole spectrum here, different ways to interpret this suffering first principle.
Exactly right. Not everyone who leans towards NU agrees on how much importance, if any, happiness should still have. It's definitely a spectrum.
So can you walk us through the different levels, starting with maybe the mildest version?
Sure. So first you have what's called weak negative utilitarianism. This version says, yes, reducing suffering is the priority. You deal with the worst pains first. But crucially, happiness still matters. It still has some positive moral value. So once you've tackled the big urgent problems, then it's okay to focus on increasing joy. Think of it like ethical triage.
Okay, pain first, then pleasure if possible. What's next?
Then you get strong negative utilitarianism. And this is where happiness really starts to fade out of the picture. For strong NU, only suffering has intrinsic moral significance. Happiness, it has no intrinsic value, zero. The sole aim is to minimize suffering, ideally bring it down to nothing. Whether you end up in a state of neutral blah or ecstatic joy doesn't matter morally as long as the pain is gone.
Wow. Okay, no value to joy itself. That's the start. And then there's the extreme end, the one that really pushes boundaries.
That's right. Extreme negative utilitarianism. This is the most radical interpretation. It takes the core idea suffering is the only bad thing and follows a logic relentlessly. If life inevitably involves some suffering, and it seems to, right? Disease, loss, death, then the most ethical action might actually be to prevent life from starting, or even to end existing life, painlessly, of course, to guarantee the elimination of all potential future suffering.
Prevent or end all life.
Yeah, and this is where NU clearly overlaps with philosophies like antinatalism, the view that it's morally wrong to create new beings who will suffer, and even extinctionism, the idea that a managed, compassionate end to all sentient life could be the most ethical outcome.
Okay, that hits hard. The idea that the purest moral path leads to essentially painless universal annihilation. It's chilling.
Yeah.
And you can immediately see why people would push back hard against this. So what are the main criticisms?
Well, the biggest one, the absolute classic, is what's called the world destruction objection. It was raised way back in 1958 by philosopher R.N. Smart. He basically said, look, if a strong negative utilitarian had a button they could press to painlessly wipe out all life on Earth, they would be morally obligated to press it.
Because zero life means zero suffering, the ultimate minimization of pain.
Precisely. And critics say, if your ethical system logically demands the destruction of everything we value as its highest moral achievement, then there's probably something deeply wrong with the system itself. It just seems incredibly counterintuitive, ethically horrifying to most people.
Right, it sacrifices everything positive just to eliminate the negative. Okay, apart from that sort of ultimate endgame problem, what about the everyday stuff? Life isn't just about avoiding pain, is it?
That's the second big critique, the neglect of joy and love. Critics argue NU just completely undervalues or even ignores all the things that make life worth living beyond just not being in pain. Things like creativity, beauty, relationships, discovery, flourishing. NU seems to flatten the human experience down to just the pain dimension.
And practically, how would you even make decisions? Most choices involve some kind of trade-off between risk and reward, potential pain, and potential pleasure.
Which leads to the third point, inapplicability in real ethics. Critics say that in the real world, making good choices almost always involves balancing potential harms and potential benefits. You can't just focus only on minimizing harm because you might end up avoiding any action that carries even the slightest risk, thereby missing out on huge potential gains or joys. It could lead to a kind of ethical paralysis or extreme risk aversion.
Okay, so there are some really significant challenges. But despite these paradoxes, you're saying this way of thinking is actually influencing things today. It sounds so out there, but where is it showing up?
Yeah, despite the critiques, you definitely see its logic or echoes of it in some really important areas, especially where people are dealing with extreme situations or massive potential downsides. Think about effective altruism.
Right. Effective altruism tries to do the most good possible. But often, that translates into tackling the worst problems first, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like extreme poverty, disease, animal suffering.
Exactly. While the overall goal might be broader utility, the focus often lands squarely on reducing severe identifiable suffering. That's where the resources can make the biggest dent in the negative side of the ledger. It aligns very closely with the NU priority.
Makes sense.
Where else? AI ethics and existential risk is another huge one. A lot of the concern there isn't necessarily about building the perfect AI utopia, it's about preventing catastrophic outcomes. Stopping a misaligned superintelligence from causing unimaginable suffering, or preventing some other existential disaster. Again, it's prioritizing the avoidance of the massive negative. It's NU logic applied to the future of humanity.
Avoiding the worst-case scenario becomes the prime directive.
Pretty much. And then, maybe more personally, you see it in bioethics. Discussions around end-of-life care, euthanasia, they often hinge almost entirely on the desire to end unbearable suffering. That's pure negative utilitarian reasoning right there. Same goes for debates about animal welfare, factory farming, animal testing. The argument is often focused squarely on preventing or minimizing pain.
So this has been quite a journey. We started with the familiar idea of doing good by making people happy, and we've ended up exploring this starkly different ethical landscape where the main, maybe the only goal is stopping suffering. The tension for you, the listener, seems really clear. How do you possibly weigh that urgent need to relieve pain against everything else that makes life valuable? Joy, love, achievement, flourishing.
It really is a fundamental tension, isn't it? It forces
Right.
you to confront what you value most deeply. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, building on that David Pearce idea, imagine technology could actually achieve the hedonistic imperative. Imagine we could engineer away all pain, all suffering completely. What would that existence be like? An existence free from agony, yes, but maybe also free from the struggle, the empathy, the depth that dealing with hardship often brings. Would that truly be a recognizable or even desirable human life? Something to think about.